This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And you're listening to Python's Paradise, your film and music show. And this is your host, Greg Gilbert, a.k.a. the Python Hyena. And folks, I had Lynne Griffin on here from Black Christmas last month, and she gave me high recommendation and praise towards the guest I have tonight. And it's funny because this guy creeped her and everybody else out in that film. I'm talking about the guy who voiced Billy. I have the talented and wonderful Nick Mancuso on the phone with me. How do you do, Nick?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm in balmy and warm Santa Monica, California, and not freezing my butt off in Canada, so I'm glad about that.
Hey, Lisa Langlois is from Santa Monica. I had her on here last year.
Yeah, well, I've been down here since I moved out here in 1976 to star in my first motion picture for Columbia, a picture called Nightwing, and that brought me out to California. But my very first picture was, strangely enough, the voice of Billy in Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, a wonderful man. We improvised it, and I did it actually standing on my head to compress the thorax and get that belly thing.
Oh, really?
And, Bob Clark added some lines, and there was an actress by the name of, I think, Muggsy Sweeney. I can't remember. It's going back to 1970 now.
Okay.
Who also did some of the voice. So it was then computer enhanced, the old primitive computers in the 1970s. There wasn't much you could do, but it turned into that kind of creepy and spooky, it's me, Billy, which, strangely enough, has been around now for almost 40 years, and just got recently re-released in Canada and also in the States.
Yeah, I've got it on Blu-ray. I would have been 2 years old when that film was released in 1974. So.
Yes, indeed, you would have been a mere babe in the woods.
That's right.
Yeah, but I'm happy. I'm happy that it's got some kind of a life. I've done almost 200 and something films, and with the exception of the Under Siege movies with Steven Seagal and some of the religious movies, the Cloud 10 movies, that I did years ago, I'd have to say that Black Christmas is probably overall the most successful film I ever did. And in terms of, being a cult hit and still having life after 40 years, which is pretty amazing.
And a Canadian film, too, which makes us proud down here.
Bob Clark, the director, was Texan, and he did that. And then afterwards, he did Porky's, which was, I think, the biggest commercial hit to come out of Canada. And
yeah.
Another film called Christmas Story. I lost track with Bob. Of course, he passed away.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
He died young, but he was a terrific director and a wonderful cast. I didn't get a chance to work with Lynn or anybody because I was just in a studio, doing the voice. But wonderful cast. I've seen them since. Art Hindle, I've known for many years, and Lynn, and we've all been in the business a long time. It was great to hook up with them again at the different conferences that I've gone to. Not that many. I've only gone to one, really, on the Black Christmas label. But I know Lynn travels around and puts a plastic bag over her face, which is very funny. But it's nice to, have something that people like and obviously enjoy. Otherwise, it wouldn't be around.
Yeah, the great cast in that. How did you get the part to do that voice? How did that come about?
Well, I think I was 17 time, 18. I was a stage actor in Canada. I was doing a lot of theater in the late 60s up to about 1975. And I ended up in Stratford and then, down to the States. But back then there was a tremendous amount of activity in the late 60s in the creation of different theaters, and I was involved with a group of people that went on to bigger and stellar heights, like Des McAnuff, who ended up doing Jersey Boys on Broadway, and Michael Ondaatje, who wrote The English Patient, Saul Rubinek, Maury Chaikin, Jackie Burroughs, and it was just a group of great people. So I was doing theater and got an audition for this voice, and Bob had me sit in a chair opposite him so he couldn't see me and make me make different sounds. And he hired me, which was great. Of course, we got paid absolutely zippity-doo-dah, but, it was fun.
Yeah. I think the film looks great, too. Like, I guess Lynne Griffin was telling me that the house is still located right there in Toronto, and I guess they got it fenced off now so people can't even visit.
I can't remember the cinematographer. It might have been Richard Leiterman, but I can't remember now. But he did a terrific job. I mean, Bob was a professional, and he knew how to make films, and he wrote and directed it, had a very clear vision of what he was trying to create, and obviously it worked. And of course, there was Olivia Hussey, who had just done Romeo and Juliet with Zeffirelli, and Keir Dullea, who was a name. He ended up, playing the astronaut in 2001.
Yep.
So it was a very, very solid cast of actors, and I think really, and there are many others, of course, I can't recall, but they were all first-rate actors, really, top-notch actors, and really you have to have really good actors to make it work.
The one I remember,
and of course Margot Kidder,
yeah, Margot,
who I ended up working with many times over the years, and Andrea Eastman, who ended up on SCTV as Mrs. Prickly, great comedian. And really, some terrific people that went on to have somewhat stellar careers, and I was part of that group. I was the voice. So how odd, but there I was.
I gotta say, I loved Margot Kidder in it. She brought tremendous.
Yeah, Margot's great. Yeah, she's tremendous.
Tremendous.
And still going strong. I just worked with her a few years ago. I brought her up because I also produce these days. I brought her up to do a picture called Real Gangsters. And she's terrific as usual. One of the best to come out of Canada, really. And everybody knows her, of course, as Lois Lane, Superman.
Oh, yeah. I saw the first two Superman movies at the drive-in theater, so I'm very well versed. And she was also into Palma's Sisters as well.
Into what?
Sisters by Brian De Palma. She did that.
Oh, yes, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so two great horror films back to back,
Right, yeah, absolutely.
But her kill scene in Black Christmas, so stylishly, beautifully done, with the...
Yeah, there is an elegance to the movie, and I think that's part of the reason why it has survived. It's a very elegant film. Well put. That, in fact, there's a kind of grace to the film, it's almost musical in some ways. And I think that's another reason why it impacts the audience, because it's very palatable. It doesn't irritate the senses, It lets you into a world, and of course now it's a classic because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the very first slasher movie, way before Friday the 13th and Freddy and, all those horror movies that,
Halloween,
really took over the market in the 80s and 90s, right?
Well, it came out the same year as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw came out in '74 as well.
Yeah, another classic, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it did predate Halloween by 4 years.
It did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it did.
And I don't know why Black Christmas rarely gets brought up as the first, or whether it was the first or not, I'm not sure, but it's certainly...
Well, the audience base, the fans have kept it going, right? I don't think the business ever really looked at it in a serious way.
No.
But the fans around the world, you know, and it's got fans everywhere, you know, continue to watch it and talk about it. And I think now it's one of the classics that they show at Christmas time in certain places. So, I think also the film's got a sense of humor. You know, it's got a sense of tongue in cheek, because Bob Clark was like that. He had a great sense of humor, and always playing around, always laughing, and he really knew how to kind of create something that had more than just one note to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of these horror movies just have one-note horror movies. I think there's like several notes in that film. You know, it's got more of a, like I say, an elegance to it and a musicality. And I think that's why it's still around, because it's a good film, and those are far and few between. But it also seemed to have caught the attention of a lot of very, confused young men throughout the world, and I think that's also part of it. You know, it just sort of deals with the theme of really kind of teenage lust, teenage loss. You know, the confusion of being a teenager, and of course Billy is the ultimate confused young man. Very much, you know, based on really Psycho, you know, by Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Which is the sort of first horror, I think, slasher classic, you know.
True, yeah.
The Psycho.
Yeah, you mentioned sense of humor, you know, and I know Lynne Griffin brought up one of the things she didn't know whether this was ad-lib, but Margot Kidder and the turtle and zebra story.
Oh yeah, I wasn't on the set for that, but yeah.
No, it's in the film where she's drunk and she's talking about turtles having sex at the zoo and
right. Yeah, well, exactly, that kind of thing.
And of course, that whole stuff at the police station, that poor deputy,
and,
they
Doug McGrath, you know, as the stupid detective or the stupid cop.
He's hilarious.
Very funny. And of course, Doug had done a Canadian classic, Going Down the Road, by Don Shabib. That was like the first Canadiana film that I can remember that had an impact. So there was a lot of Canadiana in that film.
And John Saxon, of course, a veteran in horror movies, and he, of course...
Yes, John, of course, had done a lot of films.
Yeah.
And so very solid professionals.
There's sections in that movie, for example, where, like when Margot Kidder's asleep and you see the eyes peering down at her, or you see the eyeball in the doorway. Was that you?
I think that was Keir Delay's eye. Or
okay.
It might have been Bob Clark's. Knowing Bob, it probably was his.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I actually dubbed some of Keir Delay's voice because he was no longer available, and they needed a couple of lines in the film that had to be dubbed, you know, overdubbed in the studio. So Bob asked me to do them, and I kind of imitated Keir Delay, a distant voice of him calling out. So there was a lot of things just came together naturally.
Okay.
Well, without much effort, because you had someone like a Bob Clark, you know, and he was a rarity, you know, in terms of, you know, I don't know, I'd put him up there with De Palma in some ways, you know. He certainly was, I don't think, as recognized for his gifts as a director as someone like Brian De Palma, but he was up there.
Yeah, well, certainly he had, he did a couple of Christmas classics, Black Christmas, A Christmas Story, and, of course, he had done other stuff as well. He had...
Porky's was a big one.
Porky's a big one, yep.
Yeah, that was the most successful Canadian film ever made, commercially.
That's kind of funny, isn't it?
And it started Astral, the Canadian... film company that was run by Harold Greenberg in Montreal. They produced that, and they put him on the map, you know, as a film company because of Bob.
So Porky's was more successful than Meatballs, huh?
I believe so. Yeah. In terms of commercial, revenue, I think so. Meatballs is certainly up there.
We've had a few,
Ivan Reitman.
Yeah, we've had a few successful. Bon Cop, Bad Cop was very successful, and that was very good.
There's been a lot over the years, sure, of course, and half of Hollywood is Canadian anyway. So
Trailer Park Boys.
Guy, James Cameron, and Jim Carrey, and Keanu Reeves, and Carrie-Anne Moss, and a whole slew of Canadian, and then writers, a lot of screenwriters down here too.
Yeah, Trailer Park Boys is another successful.
Yeah, very clever. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, but
John Dunsworth, who I went to university with, University of Guelph, and there was a drama department there. I was studying psychology, but I used to just act all through my high school and university days. And John was there, and then he was working in Halifax. He ran that theater that I ended up working in, Pier 1 Theater, back in 1970. And then John Dunsworth went on to become a big casting director in Halifax, and then finally ended up on Trailer Park Boys, which was great because he's a wonderful actor.
I love Trailer Park Boys. I've often wondered, I find a lot of people in the New York and Texas area know who they are. Are people in California?
I think Trailer Park Boys has been released in the States, yeah.
Are they?
As far as I know.
How popular are they in where you are?
What?
How popular are they where you are?
Trailer Park Boys? I have no idea. Not a clue.
And speaking of John Dunsworth,
but I know it's been released.
Yeah. Well, John Dunsworth's daughter was in Hobo with a Shotgun, and that was shot in Halifax.
No, really? I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know his daughter had started acting. Good news.
Yeah, Molly Dunsworth. Yeah, that was a very bloody film, Hobo with a Shotgun. But
I didn't see it. Yeah.
It had Rutger Hauer in it.
Oh, Rutger Hauer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Yeah. So people were quite excited when something like that was being shot this close to us.
Yeah.
But yeah,
of course, the film business now shoots everywhere. Half of it, more than half, 60% of Hollywood is up in Canada, between Vancouver, Toronto, Sudbury. Almost all of the major pictures, the big ones, are being done. The big Hollywood movies are all being shot in Toronto.
Well, I think Deadpool was shot up here.
Suicide Squad, just a ton of stuff over the years.
Yeah. And then there's some stuff that don't get released well, like Paul Gross has done some really good stuff, like Hyena Road. I don't know why that didn't get a wider release. Very good film.
I didn't see Hyena Road, but distribution is something that is very hard to break into, and the big studio pictures, of course, have got distribution in place. The amount of money it takes now to distribute is almost equivalent, not entirely equivalent to the budget, but you need a lot of money to get your film ahead of the pack. There's so many films being made now, thousands of them, that you never hear about, and only a few get sucked into the studio system. And they're usually studio produced, and they're usually the big action pictures, the big comic book pictures. They'll spend $200 million, and of course they'll get a global release. A picture like Hyena Road doesn't have any major stars, and that's the problem, because unless there are well-known names to the international distribution community. And that could be even a Michael Madsen or an Eric Roberts or myself, for that matter, years ago, that would be bought up by, the biggest market, which is the foreign market, which is China, Indochina, all those places, Japan, all over the world. So those guys and the buyers, they only know the name. They'll know Rutger Hauer because he did Blade Runner. The actors have to have a global hit that people can recognize to make a sale. So Paul Gross is unknown on the global agenda. And it's unfortunate, but that is the nature of the business. And that includes really great European films that never see the light of day.
True,
because
yep.
the actors are unknown. A lot of, really, I've seen some great French films, German films, Romanian films, Italian films that never see the light of day anymore because it's a wrapped up market, and you either go through the 10 guys that basically are the gatekeepers, or if Miramax were to have bought up Hyena Road, it would have been released around the world and would have been a huge hit. But that's showbiz.
Yeah, that's a downside to it, but yeah. But
it's always been that way.
Well, I remember I interviewed Uwe Boll last year, and he mentioned that one Canadian film that he really liked that wasn't released wide was Captive, and that had Ryan Reynolds in it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. It really is much more common than people are aware of. You're only getting the tip of the iceberg in terms of distribution, because, like I said, it's a little bit like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. If it ain't Coke, it's got to be Pepsi. You might be able to get a Mountain Dew or a Dr. Pepper, but it's got to have a brand name, a trademark. So if Miramax were to picked it up, the Weinsteins, it would have been a huge hit. I mean, he picked up that French film, which I thought was very mediocre, silent movie, and it got nominated for Oscars, and the actor won the Oscar. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
That's, like I said, that's the nature of the business part of it, But then, you'll take a film like Black Christmas, which probably has generated over 40 years, because it's been continuously released, a fair amount of money. But it doesn't have the, any film that does not have essential studio backing, you're probably not going to hear of, unless it's just one of those flukes like Blair Witch Project or My Great Big Fat Greek Wedding, which, one was picked up by Tom Hanks, and the other, Blair Witch, I don't know. I think they did it for 2 years on the internet or something before they managed to get, major distribution, and it made hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was only shot for about, I think, $125,000.
Yeah. Well, after Black Christmas, you had mentioned Nightwing. Did you say you made that before Black Christmas?
No,
that was
Black
after.
Christmas I did 1970. I did Nightwing 1976 for Columbia Pictures. I had the lead role. It was directed by Canadian Arthur Hiller.
Yep.
Produced by one of the big Hollywood producers at that time, Marty Ransohoff. And, they put a lot of money into it. They thought it was going to be a big hit. And I kind of knew it wasn't going to be, but I did it. And on the basis of rewrites, they had some, they had nothing but Oscar winners, screenwriters, and even the props master had won an Oscar. But movies aren't what people think they are, If everybody could just make a movie, we'd all be, like a good movie. Everybody in the business would be, billionaires. Fact of the matter is, only 2% of the films that are made actually make their money back.
Yeah. Well, you had a list of films there. I looking over that. Some of them I haven't even heard of, but I looked up their synopsises and they sound interesting, like Nightwing. And
oh yeah, I did a lot of films, but I'd say only about 6 ever got into the public awareness. The Under Siege movies with Steven Seagal, like I said, because martial arts movies sell. The Rapid Fire I did with Brandon Lee. The Christian movies I did for Cloud 10 at markets, but just about everything else. I mean, even though I've got 3 pictures in the National Board of Review in Washington, every year the North American critics, or the English-speaking critics, put together a collection of what they consider to be the best movies of the year, and I've got 3 in there, and they put them in a time capsule, the Smithsonian. I've got 3 pictures, but none of them ever made a cent, or at least, the kind of big money that, you think of when you think of movies. But that's the great majority of films.
What's the Christian films you made?
I did 3 of them for a company called Cloud 10. One was called Revelation, Apocalypse, and Tribulation.
Okay.
With Gary Busey and Carol Alt and Eric Roberts. Anyway, there was a bunch of people. Those films sold all over the Christian community in America, particularly in the South. So I can't go to Texas without people recognizing me as the Beast. Because I played the Beast, 666. I was terrifying. But that one, that made a lot of success, those films.
I come from a Christian household. That's why I say
yeah.
I brought up, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jack Van Impe used to sell them on his show. And anyway, that was about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. But they did very, very well as far as a commercial, hit.
And you
things like Maria Chapdelaine, which is a beautiful film, which I did in Quebec, directed by Gilles Carle, and is in the National Board of Review in Washington. Gorgeous film, never saw the light of day. Night Magic, which I did with Leonard Cohen, beautiful film. Again, never got distribution.
We just lost Leonard,
I have a whole list of them. That's why you haven't heard of them.
We just lost Leonard, too.
I know, one of the greats. What a wonderful man he was.
Great voice, yeah.
He was there during the filming, and he wrote 12 new songs for the film. It's called Night Magic. It's, Alliance occasionally will put it on late night, on city TV. But there's never been much push by the Canadians themselves on Canadian films. The only way you can make it is by coming down here, because you'll never get any real support from the Canadian system.
Oh, that is true. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate because, the Canadian is paying 15 cents of his tax dollar, or her tax dollar, on Canadian culture. Where does that money go? Well, you've got, for example, $3 million allotted for the Playwrights of Ontario every year, and they give out $250,000, but the ministers will go off to New York and spend $80,000 on a fact-finding mission, i.e. seeing plays. I mean, it's a system, when you calculate, and I did because I was involved at one point trying to do something about it, that, for every film dollar spent in Canada, and it's almost $3.5 billion now, mostly American money, the Canadian actor gets 2 cents on the dollar, and the Canadian writer gets 2 cents, 2 to 3 cents. So 5 cents goes to the artist, and then 95 cents goes to the rest, crews and distribution and all that. So this is not a way to run a system. You can't get excellence because you can't get support, so you're forced out of the country. You're forced to go somewhere else to make, and of course everybody tries to get into Hollywood, which is progressively harder because of all the the border stuff. And it's always been very hard for Canadians. They used to call us the snowbacks because when the union separated, the American union said, "Hey, we don't want any more Canadians coming down here and taking our jobs." So that's been going on for years. Equity was separated, ACTRA separated from SAG. So you ended up in a situation with the Canadian artist basically in an apartheid situation. He can't get across the border, and he's stuck basically having to, take 2 cents on the dollar, and he's vastly underpaid, in residuals and all that. So it's a great system for the guys that want to make money, but it really sucks for the Canadian artist. And I've tried for years to campaign, about that sort of stuff, but it's pretty well hopeless.
True.
They've got a good thing there. They've got a good thing for themselves, not great for the artist.
What was it like? You mentioned Under Siege. What was it like working with Steven Seagal?
Very strange, man. I like Steve, but very strange, man. Very odd. But you got to figure when he was 17, and I became friends with him for a while, and he's quite an exceptional being. At 17 or 18, he goes to Japan to study with Ueshiba Sensei Morai, the founder of Aikido, which is one of the toughest, and I did Aikido, one of the toughest martial arts you'll ever do in your life. And he's there, and he was the first white man to actually have a dojo, an actual teaching establishment. And he spoke fluent Japanese. I think he was married to a Japanese wife at the time. And then Destiny stepped in the form of a Julius Nasso, who was a producer, that he had gone to Japan on business, needed a translator and a bodyguard, and Steve ended up working with him, and it was him and Julius came up with Above the Law, which was made for about $8 million and made and generated up to this point, I think, about a $750 million. So overnight, he becomes a huge star. That's what you call destiny.
And Tommy Lee Jones stole that first film, I think, as the villain.
Yeah, he was in Under Siege 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he played the guy that takes over the boat and all that. And Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Busey in the original. Myself in a small role, playing the CIA operative. And then the second one starred Eric Bogosian, which took place on a train. It was nowhere near as good as the first one, directed by, I think, Andy Davis, who ended up doing The Fugitive. But the first one was well directed, I thought.
Yeah, and you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
so there you are.
I was going to say, too, you did 2 films for Mark Lester now. He did Class of 1984.
Yeah, I did. I did 3 films with Mark.
Oh, 3.
One was called The Ex with Yancey Butler, about a sociopathic ex-wife who hunts down her husband. And it was actually really good. It was quite terrifying. Yancey Butler was genuinely terrifying as a psychopathic ex-wife. And Janet Burke and who else? I can't remember. But there were a lot of good actors. And I did another one which wasn't as good.
Misbegotten?
With, I forget what it was called. It was with Sean Penn. No, with Matt, not Matt Dillon, but his brother Kevin Dillon, I think, who ended up on, I think he ended up on Entourage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did 3. I can't recollect the other one. I'm old now, so I don't remember things.
Well, Lester made one of my favorite Canadian films, which was Class of 1984.
I'll tell him that when I see him.
Yeah, well, I've had 3 interviews on here from Class of 1984. So,
you've interviewed Mark?
I haven't had Mark on here yet. I've had Lisa on here. In fact, Lisa Langlois' manager sends me a lot of clients because I've got a good thing going with them. I've had Stefan Arngrim on here, and I've had Mary Lynn Ross on here twice.
Oh, Arngrim? Yeah. Well, if you want to get Mark, I'll ask him if he'll do the show.
I would love to have him. Yeah. Because
you're a big admirer of his work, so.
Well, Class of 1980.
Every artist likes to be admired. We like to be liked. That's why we do it. But most of the time, we just get critical thumbs down. Every now and then, we hit one ball out of the park, and then everybody knows who you are, and everybody thinks you're great. But the great majority of the films that we do are just, don't make the big time. But that's what we do. It's a profession. I always say it's more a vocation than a profession.
Yeah, no, I've had 3 people on from Class of '84. Loved that film, and I know Mark has gone on to direct Commando and whatnot. But to me,
yeah, he did Commando. Yeah, he directed Schwarzenegger.
But I love Class of 1984, like shot in Toronto.
Yeah, Mark was a bit like Bob Clark. He's got that kind of, he knows how to make excellent films, no question about it. And, he also, wrote them or at least shaped them just like Bob Clark did,
Yeah.
Mark knows what he's doing. I mean, he didn't become Michael Mann, but, with huge success, but he did a pretty good career.
And you worked again with Seagal and Today You Die as well, so you got him again.
Today You Die, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Today You Die, yeah.
And I noticed you had a film called Against the Law. You worked with
Against the Law. It's very odd you bring that up. I can't even I remember the title, but I cannot remember who I did it with.
I love Nancy Allen. I noticed she's in it.
Oh, that one with the director, very odd director. Yeah, with Nancy Allen and Ford. Jerry, he was actually Stephen Ford, the son of the president.
Okay.
The detective. And who else was in there? Yeah, I forgot about that film. But then after 250 films and being over 68 years old, you tend to forget things.
I have not seen it, but I was looking at your credits so I could branch out beyond Black Christmas, and I was like, you worked with Nancy Allen, you know? I loved her in Dress to Kill, you know, so.
Yeah, she was great in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she was with De Palma during that time.
I believe so, yeah.
Terrific. Yeah, she's terrific. I haven't talked to her in 20 years now.
I've been trying to get her on the show, but I'm going to tell you, getting hold of her.
If I hook up with Nancy, I'll tell her about your show.
Well, let me tell you, it's funny. I've messaged her several times on Facebook because last year I wanted to do an anniversary celebration for Dress to Kill. The best I got was a message from her advertising the Blu-ray Criterion release of Dress to Kill, and I'm like, yeah, come on and talk about it. I don't know. Maybe she's shy. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Every actor is different. Some people want to talk and some people don't.
I don't hold it against her, but hopefully maybe she'll, you know, sometimes it takes a couple nudges to get people on here. Like you mentioned Psycho earlier. I was impressed. I got, I've done, you're my 60-second interview. I mean, I've had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter come on here. And
you had his granddaughter. Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I put that interview up on my YouTube channel actually tomorrow, and she was so down to earth and pleasant, and Hitchcock was the one that expanded my horizon on movies. He changed how I looked at movies.
Hitchcock was like Kubrick, one of the best that ever come out of Hollywood. I mean, he was amazing.
Yeah,
we could make a film that stayed with you. I mean, Psycho, because it's not more than a film; it's a legend.
Yep.
Incredible filmmaker, and apparently a tremendous eccentric.
Yeah.
Which is usually the case with great artists.
But you had some other films on here that we can plug here, like Ticket to Heaven. I didn't see that.
Ticket to Heaven was made a big splash the year it came out. They submitted me for an Oscar and for a Golden Globe, and I won the Canadian Oscar, and I won in Italy. I won awards all over the world for that performance. But the Oscar, unfortunately, because it was disqualified, because the Canadian company had released it through an American company, and it disqualified it no longer. So even though MGM and UA at the time was taking out ads in Variety Hollywood Reporter for my work, and Kevin Thomas of the LA Times said it was one of the best performances of the decade, and the Golden Globe people wanted to give me a nomination, but the Canadians had waited too long, and the president just came out shaking his head. I thought he hated it. He said, no, he said, I want to give you a Golden Globe nomination for this work, but I can't. But back then, right, all the journalists are gone. They waited too late.
Oh.
But it made a splash, and it did actually open the second year of the Toronto Film Festival. And it was an all-Canadian production, Ralph Thomas, the writer-director, Ann Cameron, the writer from Vancouver, R.H. Thompson, myself, Saul Rubinek, Dixie Seidel. It was a very Canadian production, really all Canadian, and made a kind of mythic impact for many, many years, and still does as a cult movie. And it's still being released, although we never got a cent in residuals, but it still gets out there. And it's a very powerful film, very powerful film, and one of my better performances.
Okay.
I had a chance and an opportunity to actually build a character. Ralph was a very meticulous director. Unfortunately, he's no longer in the business. He quit, and he was really one of the best in Canada and became a novelist.
Okay. Yeah, in 1984, you had a couple of films, Heartbreakers and Blame It on the Night.
Yeah, a whole bunch. And then, basically that period of time was occupied by a series I did called Stingray for NBC.
Okay.
That is still a cult hit. We only did 25 episodes. And it was, again, one of those cursed projects because we got a 48 share, which was huge. It already been canceled because it tested poorly, but when it opened, it got a 48 share, one of the biggest openings in television history. So they reordered it, and it was all last minute. And then we were getting 24s, 25s. Miami Vice was doing 28, Crime Story. And, and we were building very rapidly towards, a big audience. And then, Destiny stepped in the form of Michael Mann, who needed to have a new slot for his show. So they pulled Stingray, and they put in this show that got 13s. 2 years later, they contacted Steve Cannell, who was a friend of mine, the producer, creator of the show, and said they wanted to reorder it, but I couldn't do it because I was doing another series called Matrix, yet another flop. And by the way, it was before Matrix the movie, and strangely enough, Carrie Ann Moss was in it. Who ended up doing the film Matrix. How weird is that?
Yeah, that is weird.
Anyway, it never, now of course it's owned by, I think, Fox, and it will never probably see the light of day. Although there's a big fan club for years, they've been trying to get, to try to get a production. They want to see it again and all that, but it's highly doubtful. But you never know.
Yeah.
It's like Hunter, but Hunter was a hit. And Hunter got released in the form of a film, and of course 18, which was a huge hit.
Yep. No, and of course you mentioned Rapid Fire. Brandon Lee, you worked with him in that, right?
Yeah, Brandon Lee. That was the film he did just before he did The Crow.
Yeah,
that was his second last movie. Brandon was a wonderful, wonderful young man.
Yeah, that was a sad loss.
Very talented, and just one of those freaky flukes due to not following correct procedure. There's a way you handle guns. There's a professional way to do it. Wasn't done. And a lead tip got stuck in the barrel of one of the guns, and they put in a full charge, making it a weapon. Just one of those things, man. He got shot in the stomach and, and killed him. It was great, great tragedy because he was just a beautiful soul. And somebody that would have, certainly become a major martial arts star, but very serious about acting, too, he was, So just one of those things.
Yeah, that was tragic. And the first Crow was certainly better than the ones that followed through, because I hated the second one. Yeah. I
agree.
The second one was terrible. But,
yeah.
But, yeah, so you've never been in New Brunswick before, huh?
Well, I went through it. I drove through New Brunswick on my way to Halifax.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but no, not really.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know where we are. So.
I know.
We're like that lost little community, lost little province,
Well, it's must be very beautiful, I'm sure.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not fun when we...
I certainly found, Peggy's Cove and Halifax to be beautiful. I love the ocean out there, the Atlantic Ocean, but damn, it gets cold in the winter. It's cold.
Yeah, I don't like winter driving.
Thick blood, man.
Yeah. You don't get all that big snowfall where you are, huh?
Well, I lived in Toronto for many years, and Vancouver I worked in for a long time. Of course, we never got snow, and I worked in Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Halifax. I worked all over Canada, so I'm used to. Maria Chapdelaine, we shot in northern Quebec, was 40 below zero. We were shooting our scenes in 40 below zero. Let me tell you, that's not a pretty picture.
No.
It wasn't a hard scene to do. I was playing a lumberjack who gets lost and freezes to death, and it wasn't hard to act, I'll tell you, because I froze.
So what projects are you doing now?
I've been very busy. I've got about 6 films coming out this new year, which I've produced and written 3 of. I shot 3 in Italy because I live part-time there.
Okay.
And 1 in Toronto, a thing called Born Dead, with a very, very low budget, but tremendous actors, and a picture on the life of Gregory Corso,
Okay.
The Beat Poet, I played him, which we screened in Rome very successfully. And another one called Mer Rouge, which is about the crisis that's happening in the Mediterranean with the boat people.
Okay.
A comedy called A Lemon Grove, which we shot in Sicily with Burt Young.
Okay.
And I think the picture that may actually kind of put me back on the map is a picture I did called A Performance, a Canadian picture about an old actor who returns to the stage. And it was originally written for Chris Plummer, and of course they couldn't afford Chris. So they came to me, and it's probably the best work I've done in 30 years. Beautiful piece of writing by Stephen Wallace, a Canadian. A terrific writer, first rate, and also directed it. Very good cinematographers, and it's now in post-production. We have to do a little bit more looping, and then apparently we actually have distribution, which is pretty unusual. So it might, put me on the map a little bit.
Well, I hope that works out for you. That could be quite.
Oh, I'm happy either way. I'm perfectly content these days doing what I'm doing, which is writing and producing. And I don't give a damn about the career bullshit. I never did, actually. And I was always interested in the work, and that's what I've done. I've done 40 years of that and almost 250 films. So I'm perfectly happy being where I am. If one of these things, gets the bells ringing again, that'll be fine. I need to make some money for my kids' college education, so that'd be the only reason. But I like to write a great deal, and I've written 3 plays, one of which is being done in Romania at the National Theatre, another one they've asked me to do. In the last 5 years, I've written about 7 plays. I've just finished my second book. And
Okay.
I live, as I say, as much as I can in my hometown in the south of Italy.
Okay.
Because it's peaceful there. And, I'm in Hollywood right now. I'm in Santa Monica because I have a new agent. And, we'll try maybe to get some work again, but be happy either way.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, life is short.
Life is short.
And art is long. Ars longa, vita brevis, as the Romans used to say, which I think was the motto of MGM.
Okay.
Was it not?
I don't remember.
Ars longa, vita brevis. Life is short, art is long. Hey, you want to talk to another Canadian? Hey, come on, Russ. You're on the radio right now. The radio. You're being interviewed. By who? Oh, say hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Who you are? I'm Ross. I'm Ross Tondo. Greatest lesbian Canadian ever. That's right. And he was here in Hollywood. Yeah, native to Hollywood. Yeah, and I'm not bent over hookers and blow on the side of the road. Yeah. How's it going?
Hollywood talking to Fredericton, New Brunswick.
What's that say? How's it going, eh? How's it going, eh?
How's it going, eh?
We do say eh. It does say it a lot, actually. Some people know that. But Ross is a good actor. He's actually in my film Born Dead. And he's down here, doing what every Canadian has to do, which is to try to get work. But then he has to go through the whole process of getting visas and all that. So it's not easy for the Canadian actor nowadays. It actually never has been. But it was easier years ago when they could actually travel across the border, go to New York, do theater without any problems. But now they can't, so they're forced to kind of try to do the best they can. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, Canadians don't know that. They're not aware of the fact that the system is absolutely. There's a medical term called iatrogenic. Iatrogenic means diseases caused by medicine. And the Canadian system for Canadian artists is iatrogenic. It's very damaging to the actors and the writers. They can't survive. But the bureaucracy is doing pretty well. And you figure there's that much money and hardly any of it. I mean, they'll give $20 million to Paul Gross, but there are thousands of artists that won't get a cent when they apply, and they don't, unless they're part of Alliance or, Lionsgate. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it doesn't really help the artist to really create an indigenous Canadian industry, but the talent is there. Canada's got a tremendous amount of talent.
You're right.
But they're always forced out of the country, to make their livelihood. It's different in Quebec, of course, because they have the language thing, so they support their own. But English Canada is terrible, for actors and writers. Always has been. But it's worse now than it's ever been, that I can see.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. I agree.
So maybe, the new administration, maybe we can make a change in that area. I'm hoping that Trudeau is going to be a little bit more awake than certainly the anti-artist Harper.
Yeah.
Harper was absolutely, just didn't give a rat's ass about the artists of Canada.
No, he didn't.
And we're talking not just actors, of course, and writers, but we're also talking painters and, musicians. And although musicians can always connect to the international arena, you know what I mean? They always have been. Look who's come out of Canada. Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
I mean, my God. I mean, that is just massive talent. And also, in the writing and acting. I mean, look, James Cameron's Canadian. And, he's done the most successful films in Hollywood. Arthur Hiller, Norman Jewison, all Canadian.
Yep.
So hopefully someday, the government of Canada will wake up and realize what they're doing, and Canadians will, actually be able to support its artists, and they won't have to, escape, like prisoners, to try to make a livelihood in the arts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nick, when I was talking to Lynne Griffin, she told me I should throw something out to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge?
Yeah, vaguely.
Well, after
Vaguely.
the unfortunate passing of Robin Williams, a new one...
I loved Robin. Robin was one of my favorite people. It was Robin. Robin, him. Yeah, terrible. Yeah. What about it?
Well, a new challenge surfaced after he had passed called the Doubtfire Face Challenge. And I took the challenge. It involved taking a pie in the face and nominating 3 people for the awareness of suicide and depression. And I did that challenge, and I threw the nominations out to people I interviewed, and Lisa Langlois, a Canadian actress from class of 1984, did the challenge right there in Santa Monica. And Nancy McLaughlin from Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives did...
You want me to take a pie in the face. This is what you're telling me. Is that right?
Well, Lynne Griffin is going to do it.
That's very Canadian of you, like twisting my arms to take a pie in the face. All right.
But
as long as I get a Molson's Canadian beer in my hand, you can hit me with a pie.
Actually, Lynne Griffin was the one that brought you up.
Well, that's Lynn's idea, that's for sure.
But she and her husband, Sean Sullivan, go out and she goes, I bet Nick Mancuso would do it, for sure.
Well, it's not Mancuso, but it is Mancuso.
Mancuso.
You want me to take a pie in the face and send it to you via email, right?
Well, you could do that, and you nominate 3 people. We're trying to get the industry involved.
All right. Tell you what, I have a friend. I got a filmmaker friends. I'll do a little video of it. I'll send it to you, and then I'll nominate 3 other people to take the challenge. Okay?
If you can, nominate 3 people in the business. If you can.
I will. Well, of course, I'll nominate Carrie Ann Moss.
Sure.
Keanu Reeves.
Sure.
And anyway, I'll figure it out. I'm very busy, but I'll try to get it done, okay?
You could throw one out even to Margot Kidder.
Oh, yeah, Margot. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay.
But Lynne
Griffin, send me an email.
Sure.
With the link, and then I'll send you the pie and the challenge, okay?
But Lynne Griffin was the one I think that is throwing that out to you. Although she hasn't done it yet, she is planning to do it. But she was the one that brought your name up.
Well, that's nice. Okay.
Yeah. And now, before I go, I wanted to say when this is done, it's not going to air until next year because I got so many interviews that haven't played yet. But but when it's done, I will send you the link, and you can post it wherever you please.
Well, thank you kindly.
Yeah.
Thank you kindly.
Now
I will be sending you a pie in the face. Okay.
Yeah. And it's going to be on the CHSR site for about 3 months, and after that, it goes onto my YouTube channel.
Oh,
Now,
that's nice. Okay.
the YouTube channel, I usually have pictures to go with the audio. Now, would it be okay if I use some headshots of you to go along with that?
Yeah, go right ahead. There's tons. You just type in my name, photos, Nick Mancuso, on Google, and there's thousands of them.
Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, and would it be okay if I added you on Facebook? Would that be okay?
Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
I'll do that.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? It was wonderful talking to you, and I think the one last thing I want to ask is if you would please do a plug for my show.
Sure.
Yeah, just state your name and that you're listening to. My real name's Greg Gilbert, and my show's called Python's Paradise, like the snake, in New Brunswick, Canada.
Your name is Greg. I'm in the street. Greg Gilbert.
Yeah.
And the show is called
Python's Paradise.
Python's Paradise. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Nick Mancuso. Hi, this is Nick Mancuso, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. Keep listening.
Nick, we love you in Black Christmas, even though we don't really see you, we hear you. But you spooked us all.
Thank you. Okay.
You have yourself a blessed night.
Talk soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye.